You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Sarah Gulseth.
I'm Andy Bates.
Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for your support of The Coffee Hour. You can find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Today we have a fun story about a school. We are on an education theme this week. Wow, back to school time, all about learning. A school in my hometown, actually, at my childhood church, actually. Emmanuel Lutheran Church and School in Dearborn, Michigan has an exciting new venture happening with a school for the deaf. So joining us today is the Reverend Tyler Walworth, pastor of Emmanuel Lutheran Church and School in Dearborn, Michigan, and Our Savior Lutheran Church of the Deaf, and administrator at St. Martin Lutheran School for the Deaf. Thanks so much for joining us today, Pastor Walworth.
Good to be here.
So tell us about the congregation of Emmanuel in Dearborn.
Well, I'm new here-ish. So I got here, and Pastor Beasley was still serving as administrative pastor when I got here, and I served as an associate for a year. I sort of took the call with that understanding. And so I've been here for a year, and then I just became the administrative pastor. And Pastor Beasley and I switched places. So now he's the assistant and I'm the administrative, and he can now laugh at me for having all the responsibilities. So no, but the church itself is fantastic. We're in Dearborn, right by Ford World, and it's amazing. I've never heard so much talk about cars and manufacturing. I actually live right by the Henry Ford Museum, and then they call it Ford Land, and I guess that's for a reason. So, but of course, everyone else knows. I think it's still the case. But I know that the population of Dearborn is like 50-50 Arabic speaking versus, those who are English speaking. But so there's a heavy Middle Eastern, population here. So that's a new dynamic for me. And we're right off the highway, and the churches, we have about 150 people, and we have a school.
Speaking of languages and culture, there's another language and culture among you as well. You're also pastor of Our Savior Lutheran Church of the Deaf and administrator for St. Martin's School for the Deaf. So tell us about the deaf community, the deaf community in Dearborn, and the need for deaf education in that area.
Yeah. So when you said that title, I really have to get a shorter title. That's ridiculously long. Maybe we should just drop some names. But anyhow, so I've been working with the deaf now since I got out of the seminary. My original call was to Millneck. They're now no longer working so much with the church, but my original call was to be a missionary, and I was stationed in Michigan, and I've always had Our Savior Lutheran Church of the Deaf. They are the original church that came from Lutheran School for the Deaf, which was founded some 80-some years ago. Actually, CFW Walther talked about the Lutheran School for the Deaf. It was a Civil War orphanage, and they just got a guy from Germany who knew some sign language, and so that's how it sort of began. This like education part is they were moving from an orphanage to like a school, and it was cool. It's the minutes of Walther talks about it as well. But anyhow, that's the roots. But Our Savior Lutheran Church of the Deaf came from Lutheran School for the Deaf, which now is no longer. Now that I can't remember the date when they closed, but they're actually right in our backyard off Nevada Avenue, right up Southfield Freeway here. But they closed, and then they turned into Lutheran Special Education Ministries, which is still a recognized service organization of the LCMS. But the church is still there. So the gates of hell shall not prevail. So the church kept on going, and it sort of moved from place to place because they sold the school and chapel. And so I became their pastor when I got out of seminary 7 years ago. So I've served them ever since. And then Dearborn came up because there was I'll probably get into this more later, but they closed a deaf program in the Dearborn area. And so deaf programs work in the public school system like this. You have a group of deaf children, and sometimes they're classified as special education. If that's the case, then they go with all the other special education children, whatever that might be. It could be Down syndrome or some other, something else that puts them in that category. And then they're trained in that way. Or it could be that they have an interpreter that goes with them around to all their hearing classes, and they interpret all the classes for them. So that's what a deaf program looks like. Sometimes it's all the deaf children are together, but that program closed. And so there was about, I think, 25 deaf children that were part of that program in the Dearborn area. And when it closed, the parents came and said, "Hey, can you help us out?" And so we're like, "Yeah." So I talked to Emmanuel, and this is before I was pastor here, funny enough. And so so Emmanuel, of course, said, "Yes, we love it. You can use this classroom." They were just so generous. And so we started it that summertime. We said, "Okay, everyone come and we can start the school." And no one showed up. So since that time, we've sort of been, restructured. But that's how it started. That's how I sort of started.
What was that relationship like between the deaf community that you were working with and the church community at Emmanuel and even in the Detroit area? What is that relationship like to be able to move forward with something like this?
Yeah. So this is the strange thing in the deaf world. So there's deaf with a capital D. That's the deaf community, and any community. Number one thing is language. You can't have a community without language. I know that's sort of obvious, but you'll be shocked at how many people tell me, "Hey, so you know Braille?" No, that's for the blind. Not the same thing. So the deaf community actually has their own language, just like Spanish, just like Italian, and so if you're talking about that community, that is a community, and they don't see themselves as disabled, but instead as those who gather around the language of sign language and have their own culture and have their own history. And so that's sort of how they view it. The other side is those who don't have the language. They don't have sign language, American Sign Language. And so instead, they don't have a culture. They are participating in the hearing culture however they can. And that might be through hearing aids, cochlear implants. There's lots of ways to try lip reading. And all that is an attempt to get those deaf children, small d deaf, who see it as sort of a disability, and get them back into the hearing culture. So you can sort of see that those clash a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us more about St. Martin Lutheran School for the Deaf and what's happening there today.
Yeah. So, you heard the flop recently. So that was more than 7 years ago. That was only, has it been that long? I think 5 years ago now, where that sort of failed. But then we ended up getting one student, and so we just sort of said, let's just do it. So we had one student for a while, and then we slowly started adding students, where today we have 5 students. And just to give you an idea, the deaf program in Detroit, where, big metropolis area, they have, I think, 35 to anywhere from 35 to 40. And that's like all that deaf, the entire school system. So just to put it in perspective, I know 5 sounds small, but in comparison, it's not crazy. It's smaller, and we're hoping to grow it. But having 5 is a great start for us. So what we did, though, is we recently shifted, to get to today. What we were trying to do a model where we would have the kids in a classroom with an interpreter, and then we would have some instruction in sign language. And so they'd sort of have a both-and experience. They'd have a deaf program experience, but also have sign language used on a regular basis. We recently changed that, and we moved it to the model where we're doing all instruction in sign language. Everything's happening in sign language, and the result has been astounding in the sense that that the children are growing. They're, let's see, 2 of them are already at grade level in reading. And we can get to how that's uncommon. But yeah, so the school today, we have these 5 students. We're instructing them in sign language, American Sign Language. We have a deaf instructor, and we have 2 teaching assistants, and we have a classical education for the kids.
This is just an amazing thing for these kids to be able to be immersed in this learning environment in their own language, to be able to have that instruction in ASL. How is this such a unique experience for these deaf children to be able to have this education experience in ASL?
Yeah, so what I was describing before was that the program idea, And it wouldn't be that they wouldn't have any exposure to American Sign Language, but the state of Michigan, I think now, and I could stand corrected, but I think they're back to an oral education model, which means they're pushing all of the students who have deafness towards lip reading and towards cochlear implants and towards English. So using sign language as little as possible is actually the goal. Whereas for us, the unique part of it, the wonderful part is that they're able to flourish with a whole language, to learn an entire language with zero barriers. Because again, when you think about hearing aids and cochlear implants, we always assume, you plug it in, done. That's not the case. A cochlear implant is not replacing hearing. It's learning how to hear in a different way. And it doesn't always work. Two of our students, actually, maybe all three of them, or let's see, two of them at least have had cochlears, and they're here for that reason, because it's not effective in a classroom setting. It's very difficult for them. It's very distracting for them. So the environment we have is everyone signs. The hearing school actually learns sign language. So the hearing school at Emmanuel, they all are learning sign so they can communicate with the kiddos in the deaf school. And in the classroom, they just get to be free. Everything is done for them in sign language. They get to have a typical experience of a school. They get to have the community, the camaraderie of their friends, the example of teachers who sign fully and who treat sign language as a language that's respectable. So yeah, it's really an enriching thing for them.
We're talking with the Reverend Tyler Walworth, pastor of Emmanuel Lutheran Church and School in Dearborn, Michigan, and Our Savior Lutheran Church of the Deaf, and also administrator of St. Martin Lutheran School for the Deaf. We have more to talk about, but we need to take a quick break. You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Sarah Gulseth.
I'm Andy Bates.
At Concordia University, Wisconsin, we believe you were created for a reason: to use your God-given gifts to help others, to live a life of self-sacrifice in a me-first world, to live a life that's uncommon. Whether you're taking one of 50-plus online programs or learning with us in person on the shores of Lake Michigan, you'll be equipped to make an uncommon impact. Learn more at cuw.edu. Concordia University, Wisconsin. Live uncommon.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Sarah Gulseth.
I'm Andy Bates.
We have the Reverend Tyler Walworth joining us today, pastor of Emmanuel Lutheran Church and School in Dearborn, Michigan, and Our Savior Lutheran Church of the Deaf, and also administrator of St. Martin Lutheran School for the Deaf. And before we went to break, you were talking about what a unique experience this is for the deaf children who are in the classrooms. And you also mentioned that there are also hearing children in this school. Can you talk about that relationship a little bit more? That sounds such a cool thing for the deaf children and also the hearing children to be immersed in that environment together. Can you talk about the relationship between these two groups of children?
Yeah. So when St. Martin School for the Deaf was originally started, the idea was that Emmanuel would use American Sign Language as their second language, which is, again, I can't say enough about the administration of Emmanuel and how they've been so willing to sort of branch out and help out with the deaf community. But so what it looks like on a day-to-day is all the hearing children every week take sign language classes. And then at lunchtime, all the children, so we have a deaf table, and the children go, and there'll be different groups from Emmanuel, the hearing school, and they'll go and sit with the deaf students, and they'll all just sign again. Because again, they're learning sign, and it gives them, the benefit of having that experience. The hearing teachers here at Emmanuel have learned enough sign that they can communicate with the children, the deaf children, so that they can hold basic conversations. They know what they're saying, and so the deaf children really never are feeling like no one understands me, or I can't participate. And so it's really a great partnership between Emmanuel and St. Martin Lutheran School for the Deaf.
That partnership that embraces total communication is just, that's really beautiful. Now, you mentioned lunchtime. Are there other opportunities that children from Emmanuel get to also interact with the children and the students from St. Martin Lutheran School for the Deaf?
Yes. So we do recess together. So they have, those are really the free time. So they recess and lunchtime. But we're beginning to try to meld our field trips together as well, so that we can sort of have, joint learning experiences outside of the classroom. So we're working on that this year. And, it's interesting because it is a sort of a work in progress. We're slowly climbing into, what it's like to be this partner, to have Emmanuel and St. Martin work together. But we're exploring all the time more opportunities for them to interact.
First question, do you ever get to make it out to recess? And second question, what are the games that have emerged out of this on the playground?
Those are good questions. Well, as I'm sure you've heard many times, COVID shut everything down. So this has been sort of a hope in progress, because it's been a while since we had the classes go out in little pod things and whatever else we did for COVID. So this year will be, we're sort of back into, what we can do. But we did have a couple events this summer that we had. And it's funny because when it comes to sports and things like that, you'd be surprised at how little you need to use English. They just happen, and the greatest part about kids, and this is just, a great human commentary, is that they just play, right? They don't, my son goes to the school, well, I have two sons now go to the school, and they just, they don't even, they know some sign language now, but when they don't know words, they just like point to stuff and like say, the kids are just, they're great at overcoming these barriers that we assume like, oh man, I gotta know how to do all this, but the kids just boom, hey, let's play this game. Oh, you don't know how to do this here, and so they just get it, and then they click so well. So all their, the games that they were playing this summer, kickball, we played some wiffle ball and some other running tag games. And, as soon as they get the rules, they're off and running. And the great thing is they'll hold each other accountable too. So you cheated. Usually there's hitting involved and we have to stop. But anyway.
Yes. Oh, yes. Memories of playground. Everything that happens on a playground. You mentioned that your own kids are in this school. Do you have stories from the families who have been able to take advantage of this really awesome relationship and this really unique learning experience for these kids? What are the families talking about?
As I've been here, I'm doing my best to get more interaction from the families. I know the deaf families more only because I interact with them a little more. But I see my kiddos play with their kids, and what they love the most is that they really can have a place where they're not excluded. There's no barriers or fences or, they're in their deaf classroom or whatever. But when we're at recess, we're there together, we're at lunch together. And the other part that we actually just sort of formulated is we're now all on the same curriculum. So we we're hoping to be accredited here in the next couple of years, but as a classical school. And so Emmanuel and St. Martin's have the same classical curriculum. And I think that's going to help too with the families sort of getting together, and sort of having these discussions and their children learning the same. So I think that those things have been the most beneficial from the parents that have talked to me, and especially again, coming from the programs in public school where they don't have any resources. And many times it's pulling teeth just to get interpreters so that they can be in a regular class, to having a full class, full curriculum, everything, and full fellowship with everyone. So I have not seen that because I haven't had to experience that, but these parents who have had to experience their deaf children in places where they're so stuck, I think it's a great freedom for them.
Tell us more about how the curriculum and the education that students receive at St. Martin's School for the Deaf is a Christ-centered education, and why that's important.
Yeah. Well, starting from, sadly, the public school system has gone more away from this because it's hard for them to express any truth at all when it comes to what is a human person. But, I've mentioned classical education, and, the way that we start is, in human nature, and what we need more than anything is Jesus Christ, who makes us fully human again because we've lost the image of God. And all the students here have experienced and do experience that on a regular basis, that our education starts with redemption, that we are all children of God being washed in the blood of Christ. And that's really why we're learning now, because we're free. And now we have these 7 liberal arts that we're learning, but all grounded in the creation God gave us, and now the creation God redeemed for us, so that all the things that we learn are from the basis of being this redeemed child of God. And so really that's the foundation for everything we do, in thankfulness to him and growing up back into the image he made us to be.
Mm-hmm. How does that translate then into what the kids are learning every day and their experiences that they have every day in the classroom?
So it's cohesive, I think. And I think maybe that's the best way for me to put it, is it all sort of melds together. So the English that they're learning isn't just a separate subject, but instead they'll learn a book, which allows them, in a classic book, that has good language and good English. And so let me go to the deaf students. So they're learning classic English literature. This year they're going to be learning Latin, and they're taking these things as the best things, and they're able to see these models of what the best English looks like. And then they practice that. They sign it, and then they write it. So they'll have copybooks in class. So like a single class will look something like this, where in the morning they'll recite all their facts, the math facts and the English facts and all these things. And then they'll sit down and do some of their read alouds for, whatever classic literature we have to read for them. Of course, the younger ones have, the classic picture books, good children's literature. They're not reading the Odyssey. So then after that, we'll do some more English exercises. And then we have a religion class where we go over all the Bible stories. And then we'll have the Latin class. But all of it is connected to, the things they're copying are the things they just read. And the stories they're creating are connected to those stories as well. So all of these things then become a cohesive way of copying those who have gone before us, who have been the best at these things, the best at producing this knowledge and really at feeding the soul. I mean, that's so they're able to soak all this in and learn English, learn math in a way that has been done throughout history.
How can families learn more about St. Martin Lutheran School for the Deaf?
Well, we have a website. So St. Martin's is smild.org. So SMILD. It's not really a great word to say, but smild.org. They're actually a branch of Ephphatha, and that's ELMS Deaf. So ELS-deaf.org. And those two websites are really where we have all of our information. Ephphatha is the larger ministry in Michigan where we deal with all deaf, not just children in the school. But St. Martin's is sort of our particular project for working with children and giving them a good education.
Are there any other resources for people, parents who are interested in learning more about the deaf community, and resources if they are interested in learning ASL on their own or reaching out to the deaf community around them? Do you have any other resources for those people?
Oh, good question. So we've been gathering, I should say we, my wonderful teacher, Mrs. Diana Rice, she's been gathering all this up. We're actually in the process of putting all that on our website. So again, that's the smild.org website. So we have a whole resources page there too, has been gathering those together. And there's lots of great stuff out there now for American Sign Language because video is so easy. So I would, again, go to those places. And go right to the resource page if you don't want to read anything else. And we should have most of those resources there for you. They do a great job at that, at getting all that on. So.
Fantastic. The Reverend Tyler Walworth, pastor of Emmanuel Lutheran Church and School in Dearborn, Michigan, and Our Savior Lutheran Church of the Deaf, and also administrator of St. Martin's School for the Deaf. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Sarah Gulseth.
I'm Andy Bates.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.